let us now proceed to line number one and speak to one of the women, who is trying to become the leader of the Liberal Party of Newfoundland and Labrador, Cathy Bennett. Hi, Cathy, you're on the air.
Good afternoon, Paddy.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure to have you on.
And wanted to give you a call about some information that we released today on my position on Muskrat Falls, if that's okay.
Let's go.
Well, as you know, Paddy, in the debate structures that we've been having over the last number of weeks, the most time that you get to speak about Muskrat Falls in a debate is about 2 minutes. And as many of your listeners know, I've been a supporter of the project, and I think it's important that we continue to have the conversations about the project. But from my perspective, when we talk about Muskrat Falls, I think we need to shift the conversation. The project has started. We can't look back. We need to look forward. And I think it's important for us to talk about what things need to happen now to make sure that project delivers the benefits to the people of the province.
What about the real hurdles that are actually in front of us? There's issues surrounding the federal loan guarantee with the court cases that are ongoing and other issues. The water management agreement is in the courts. There's a problem potentially with the maritime link, Emera, and the Nova Scotia regulator. So there's some real legitimate hurdles before we can quickly say, well, the project's already started, we've come too far.
Well, I think using the word hurdles gives people a really false sense of what's going on. First and foremost, Muskrat Falls and building the dam is about replacing a 40-year-old asset in Holyrood. And as many Newfoundlanders, particularly Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, particularly those of us that live on the island know, this year we had 2 major outages as a result of equipment failures at Holyrood. That facility has outlived its usefulness. And from my perspective, what I've seen is that any other solution to replacing Holyrood would cost us $1.7 billion more than what we're going to spend in Muskrat Falls. Muskrat allows us to have power that we need for residential use on the island, and it also allows us to have power for industrial projects and projects that are going to happen in Labrador.
But that may not happen, though, right? I mean, that's just one of the issues with the Nova Scotia regulator ruling, is the covenant for a long-term agreement for so that it can be lowest cost option, just using their words. They are going to want upwards of the remaining 40% of the power to be able to satisfy the regulator. But that
doesn't have anything to do with the fact that without a federal loan guarantee, without a connection to Nova Scotia, forget all of that for a second and go back to the beginning. My question is, what are we going to do about Holyrood? How are we going to replace that power? One of the things that is striking to me as I toured around the province this summer, I can appreciate, I have a total understanding why in many parts of the province it may be difficult to see that there is an increased need for power on the island. We have parts of the province that, populations are moving away and communities are feeling the effects of, people moving out of the province and moving to other places for jobs because the jobs aren't in their communities. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have parts of the province where there's increased residential properties and there's increasing energy needs from residential homeowners. We have to do something to replace Holyrood first and foremost. And Muskrat Falls, as just that project alone, forgetting the federal loan guarantee, forgetting whether we sell to Emera, Muskrat Falls is cheaper by $1.7 billion. Now, when you build Muskrat, it gives us the ability to have some extra power. And that extra power, we can decide to spill the power or we can decide to sell it. I think if you have extra that you may or may not use, you want to at least try to sell it. And in this case, Emera is paying somewhere in the vicinity of $1.5 billion so that they build a line that we use 2/3 of. And they are going to be able to use it for 1/3. And the fact that the URAB in Nova Scotia said they want Emera to look at buying more, to me is a good thing. That means that we have a customer who wants to buy more of the power should we decide to sell it.
I think that's a fair point, because market rate is only going to be achieved regardless of who the customer is, and that's all we're ever going to get for the power in the mainland. But just in that point, the points you're making there, Cathy, you tried to have it both ways. You said that it doesn't matter about the federal loan guarantee or the ability to sell to Emera, but if we build a dam and it's cheaper by $1.7 billion, we have additional power that we can sell to Emera. But we can't if the maritime link is in jeopardy and the other issues that are also in front of the courts. Hurdle is not a negative word, but you can't have it both ways when trying to sell the benefits of Muskrat.
But the Emera link I don't believe is in jeopardy. I think what the URAB has said, based on what I've read, is that they want Emera to be able to buy even more.
Yep.
And I think what that means is it gives us a place to sell some of our own power. On that line, as I'm sure many of your listeners know, there's, that line from, Port aux Basques over to Nova Scotia or around there is going to be about 500 megawatt capacity. Nova Scotia or Emera is purchasing for $1.5 billion the right to use 170 megawatts for a period of time. That leaves us 330 that we can use ourselves, and we can use it in prime time. And the good news is that gives us a pipeline to go and sell more power into the U.S. if we choose to create more power on the island.
I'm not anti-Muskrat, but that's not true, though. Once again, Cathy, with 500 megawatts, if we sign a long-term covenant with Nova Scotia to supply them with the additional power they requested, then we don't have any capacity on that 500 megawatt transmission line. For your position to be true, we need to have another 500 megawatts.
No, Patty, that's not.
But how can that be, though?
That's not correct. But right now, my understanding of the agreement is that there's 500 megawatts on that line, and that Emera has the ability and the rights to use 170. There's 330 there for us to use. If we decide in negotiations with Emera to give them more power and sell them more power, then we'll do that. It's our power to sell. The problem, Patty, is that...
But Cathy, you said then we had other power generation opportunities to sell across that cable, but that's patently not true. If we have to sign an agreement with Nova Scotia to give them the additional power, then there is no capacity on the line. So we may indeed have wind farms in Wreck House. We may indeed develop natural gas. We may do all sorts of things to generate additional power, but it won't be transmitted on that cable if we sign a long-term agreement with Nova Scotia.
Yeah, but the terms of the agreement, Patty, will be over in 35 years, right? In 35 years, we own 100% of that line.
Which is also the life expectancy of the cable. But
go back to the beginning, Patty, without selling anything to Emera, without selling anything at all, and you go back to the beginning and say, look, what are we going to do to replace Holyrood?
Well, are you asking me?
Well, so there's lots of discussions around selling the extra that we have created from Muskrat Falls, but we move away from the fundamental principle that we have to do something around Holyrood. And for me, the reason the project, was something that I supported is that I think we have the best, lowest cost option. Now, what I do worry about is I don't have any confidence that this particular government can manage the project and bring it in a way that meets the needs of the province. I don't believe we are best positioned with this government to be able to get the most value out of that extra power that we're going to have. I don't believe we have a government that's going to be able to look out for our best interests. I mean, their track record in budgeting for the last 2 years should be a reason why we'd be very nervous about them continuing to manage the project. And quite frankly, when it comes to the 5 candidates that are running, I believe that I've got the most experience and the most information and knowledge about the project because I lived through the development of the business cases, that I'll be the best one to manage it.
But would you be managing it, or is it Ed Martin and Nalcor managing it, though? There's another here.
Well, I think that the role and responsibility of the Premier and government is to make sure that we hold our Crown corporations accountable to deliver on the targets that we set for them. And I think, the other thing that certainly concerns me about the Muskrat Falls discussion is there's many people in the province that believe that this project is the right. They believed it last year. They continue to believe it this year. But there's a tremendous amount of information that's going out in the public that is, I believe, being used as a scare tactic to scare seniors, to scare people on fixed incomes about the project and the impact it's going to have on them. And I think we need to just say clearly that, government needs to make sure that no senior and that no person on low income is disadvantaged because of Muskrat Falls. I've said that in the debates. I've said a Cathy Bennett government would ensure that that's the case because I don't want this project. And when I put my hand up to support it and vote it, it was never my intention to have that project put anybody at a disadvantage. Government's role and government's responsibility is to stand up for people who need government to stand up for them. But the scare tactics that are going on, and people are being, confused and they're fearful about the project. I believe it's special interest groups trying to hijack the Liberal Party right now at a time when the Liberal Party momentum is surging, momentum that I'm happy to be part of. there are a lot of issues in our community, in addition to Muskrat Falls, and we have to continue to have the conversations, but there's other issues that are also not having conversations about.
Sure, but some of those are intertwined, right? Like the cost of living so far as seniors is concerned, whether it be affordable housing, the cost of their prescriptions, access to healthcare, all those types of things. But of course, people immediately who are listening are saying, so is the cost of their hydro bill. So are you suggesting as a way to provide for seniors and others who are so-called left behind economically, that if we sell power, that revenue does not just go to Nalcor and the provincial coffers, can be used to reduce rates? Or you talk about subsidizing seniors' power bills further than we are now? Or what do you think?
Well, you know what? I'm glad that you took my notes from the debates that I've had in the last couple of weeks. I've said every time when I've been asked about Muskrat, I've said that any revenue that we get from that project, any extra, we should absolutely look at how we continue to make sure that people who are on fixed incomes or seniors don't get hurt, and that we take that income and we direct it towards them. And if we direct it towards their rates for their utilities, that's fine. And if we direct it towards healthcare, so we have even better healthcare, that's fine too. But government's responsibility is to make sure that people don't fall behind. And I think a Liberal government is way more focused and positioned than this current government to ensure that nobody's left behind. And Patty, from my perspective, I understand that people are scared, and I understand that they're worried. And I guess all I can say is that my priority as Premier and as leader of the Liberal Party would be to ensure that we don't leave anybody behind, and that we make sure that people on fixed incomes and seniors who have earned the right to live in their communities and deserve to be respected in the places that they've chosen to live have that ability. And we make sure that, the increasing cost, not only of power and the worries about power, you talk about affordable housing. We have incredibly challenging issues around this province when it comes to housing and when it comes to things like, personal care homes, long-term care facilities, because seniors want to be able to make the choices to stay in their communities and live there. And from my perspective, I believe that an energy policy that's based on giving us energy that's created not from a commodity of oil, which Holyrood right now is, but rather a commodity of water, which Muskrat is, gives us the best opportunity to continue to keep rates down over the long run.
It's one of the selling points. It's one of the selling points that Nalcor and the government have totally missed the ball on. When people say how much is power at the Upper Churchill and it's 3.2 cents on the market, that's a selling point that no one's used. But you talk about the openness and you want to leave no one behind, that kind of stuff. All the Liberal candidates and the party itself says they'll repeal Bill 29, but some of the mistrust of the project comes from what people perceive to be the secrecy surrounding it. If you were the Premier, would you indeed reverse some of the legislation that is keeping the Auditor General and the public eyes out of the Nalcor books? Look at the contracts with SNC Lavalin and X, Y, and Z.
I'm happy as Premier to let the people, because it's the people's government, look at everything and anything that the people want to look at and repeal any legislation that doesn't give the people the confidence that government is open. People are not going to believe that government is open singularly by removing a piece of legislation. What they're going to believe is when you make legislative changes, but you also back that up with actions around being open and accountable. And I think it's not just about the legislation that needs to be repealed, which I've said I would, but it's also about the behavior and the openness and the communication that you have with people explaining things. This government, the biggest problem, as far as I'm concerned, that this government has had when it comes to Muskrat Falls is their inability to explain it in a way that helps people not only understand it, but not be afraid of it when we have special interest groups out there who continue to want to ratchet up the noise.
Who are those groups? Who's trying to hijack it?
You know what? I think there's lots of people out there who misunderstand the project, who are pontificating and speaking about it in a way that they feel is educated, and I don't understand their motives. And my focus is making sure that the information that I believe is true, the information that when I go home at the end of the day and I tuck my kids in at night and I worry what's going to happen to them in 30 years, that I'm confident that my position, which I'm clear on, isn't one that's going to put them at a disadvantage. And I'm prepared to step up and step in to politics because I want to hold myself accountable to that decision. I want to make sure, in working with government and working with people of the province, that we don't leave people behind because we make bold decisions. I'm not going to sit on the fence and be waffly about things. I think people expect their leaders, especially the Premier, to be strong, confident, but empathetic as well to the concerns that, people have in rural communities and communities throughout the province.
It's a huge issue. One quick one before we'll move on from Muskrat Falls, because I actually think I have a fairly good grasp of the project, and I hear a lot of conversation about it. Some of the naysayers maybe do exaggerate, so do some of the proponents. So that's where we are in such a polarizing issue. The concept of a temporary foreign worker has also landed at your feet. People are pointing at you as an employer, and your use of temporary foreign workers. I don't even know where this comes from, Cathy, and you can fill us in where some things were taken out of context. People say that you have intimated that there aren't people fit in this province that could be the managers in your stores. You use temporary foreign, and did they use temporary foreign workers, and it's because you wouldn't pay them less and whatever. Can you just speak to exactly what's going on? What did you say about the ability to hire Newfoundlanders and their ability to run your shops? And what about the foreign workers? How do you pay them? And give us a breakdown on that front.
Yeah, very, very quickly. First and foremost, I believe in every single case, and let me be clear again, in every single case where Newfoundlanders and Labradorians want to do and are trained to do and have the skills to do the jobs, they should be the people to get the jobs. Secondly, I believe that as employers, we have a responsibility to pay our employees competitively, and that nobody should be allowed to use an international or temporary foreign worker program to keep wages low. I haven't. I understand my wage program, and I'm proud of the wage program I have for my people. My decision to bring in international managers into my business was due to the fact that we had a location that wasn't on full operating hours because we couldn't find individuals who were trained to do the work. We needed people to be on our team to help us train our existing staff so we could train them to move up the ladders. And Patty, you know what? Since I've brought in my international managers, I am hugely proud of the fact that we have been able to promote over almost a dozen local Newfoundlanders and Labradorian young men and women into our management ranks. And I'm also proud to say that we've been able to keep our business operating, at full capacity, employing even more Newfoundlanders and Labradorians in our business. I think we have to recognize that we can't ignore the fact that there are skills gaps and that have to be filled so businesses and essential service providers can continue to operate. And you know what? I'm proud of the fact that I'm paying more taxes because I have my business fully operational. For me, the Liberal Party has always been a party that's been open, to new Canadians of all countries, all religions, on all cultures. And this includes welcoming them here to mentor and train local people so we can expand our skill and knowledge base. And I'm really proud that by being able to, do the things I've done, as I said, I'm employing more people in my business. And the last thing I'll say, Patty, is, I was a huge advocate. I lobbied this government last year to implement legislation that would require us to have licensing around organizations and companies that bring in international employees to work in companies, because we are one of the few jurisdictions in Canada that doesn't have a licensing requirement. Nova Scotia's recently announced that legislation. As a matter of fact, last year, I offered a solution to government, which was, ask those service providers to put a $50,000 bond down to verify that they're dealing with ethical employers. Because nobody who operates unethically should be allowed to bring in international employees to work in any business to keep wage rates down. It's unacceptable. We have to be competitive.
Well, of course we do.
Have to make sure that our people are taken care of first.
I understand and appreciate that point. I often get hammered on my position about temporary foreign workers, but I wanted to allow you to elaborate on it because there's been a lot of to and fro on the issue. We've gone way over time, Cathy, but I appreciate your call today. Certainly people who have comment to offer here in the program, they're welcome to do so, and stay in touch. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.